My wife Jamie is here today. She's in the front row. And those who are on the marriage retreat, you realize we probably need a marriage retreat. We shared a lot of our stories with you. My two daughters are not here. My youngest is at home with some of our family. She didn't want to come to a marriage retreat with her parents. I understood that. And my oldest is a junior, about to be a senior at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. She said she would never leave us. She lied, so we've disowned her. No, I'm just kidding. She's amazing, and it is great to be here and see so many of you. Last time I was here was during a transition and the installation of Pastor Matt and Allie as pastors of this church. And just to be here, can I just encourage you, there's life in this place. Listening to the hallways, there's joy, there's sounds of happiness, there's the presence of the Lord. I don't want to say this in a negative way, but that's not often the case. We've left services where my wife has literally cried in the car on the ride home, saying, God, how do we help this church? And then there are days like today, we'll get in the car and we'll say, God, you're so good. Because there's life here at Bethany. Last time I was here, I mentioned the balcony people and said somebody should make a Bethany balcony people shirt, and then somebody from your church actually sent me a Bethany balcony shirt. They had it created. It was really neat. I still have it. It was really fun. And how many know today's a good day? Ohio State lost. Come on. Come on. I mean, this is a day to celebrate the goodness of the Lord. Come on. Come on. Today I want to share with you, and I'm wandering. I got to get focused here. Do we have a clock somewhere that can warn me? Okay, Jamie, you're my clock today. Today I want to talk to you about a subject about moving forward. How many know little commitments you make add up to big results? I believe this, that greatness is not found, it's very seldom ever found in a moment. I don't know, maybe you have some heroes in this room, but very seldom do you ever pull someone out of a burning car or a burning building. Very seldom, even though those are the things that get covered on the news, do you ever find yourself in a heroic moment that becomes a great moment, because those are far and few between and those are more rare. But what I have learned is this, that greatness is really the result of little moments of goodness compounded over time. My dad is my hero. And he's not my hero because in one moment he did something. It's because I've watched my dad live a godly life his entire life. I've never seen him preach something he didn't live, and I've never seen him, listen, I've only seen my dad really mad one time. And it was righteous anger. I've never seen my dad lose his temper. I've never heard him say it's something that was inappropriate. I've never seen him do anything but treat my mom with respect and guidance. In fact, my biggest worry about getting married and being a dad is that I wouldn't be as good as him. But I can't tell you one single moment that made him that great. But I can tell you a lot of little moments over time that added up into the greatness that he is to me today. What commitments we make, often we don't realize, shape our tomorrow in levels and in impacts that we have no idea. What you do in your 20s greatly affects your 30s, and what you do in your 30s affects your 40s. How many of you are now in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, and you're saying, I should have had that knee surgery in my 20s? Or your cholesterol comes back too high. Anybody been there? I remember when I lost 90 pounds a few years ago, I went to my doctor who had been telling me I needed to lose weight. And I came to my doctor and he said, and I weighed in and I was really proud of myself, 90 pounds, this is my moment. This doctor's gonna give me a hug. He's gonna give me an award. I am like his favorite person. And he says to me, he says, so your weight is this, that's good, and keep doing well. For years, he's been telling me, you need to lose weight. So I literally, in the doctor's office, he's been the medical doctor of the year for internal medicine 2 times in his career. And he's awkward, he's super weird, but he's been my doctor since I was 8 years old. And so I literally said, "Doctor, aren't you going to say anything else about 90 pounds of weight loss?" He said, "Do you need me to?" I said, "Yes, I need you to be proud of me." And he literally goes, "Yay." And he walked out. I came home, my wife said, "How'd the doctor's appointment go?" I said, "All my levels are perfect." She said, "Why are you so sad?" I said, "Dr. Greenberg went, yeah." How many know you get to certain parts of your life and you realize where you are as a result of what you did in your previous seasons? Listen, you don't get to the end of life and be out of money because you didn't make enough money. Often it's because you spent more than you made. Commitments we make are made and need to be remade all the time because they matter. And this happens in our spiritual realm as well. I remember being in the business world. I worked at EDS back in the day. How many remember Ross Perot? I worked at EDS, then I worked at an oil company. I was in sales at an oil company. I really enjoyed that. Had opportunities to become a specialized trained oil person that would have made a lot of money and retired at a young age. And I was really enjoying that. Even though at Fahola Campground I had felt that God may want me to do ministry. How many know sometimes when God speaks, you just don't listen? And it wasn't because I had a bad experience in ministry. It's just I didn't want to deal with everybody else's problems. I had enough of my own. And one day I remember getting this job opportunity, and I came to sit at my desk, and the receptionist came around the corner, and she says, "Are you going to get this opportunity?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Wow, you're going to be a boss someday. You're going to make a lot of money. You are so young, and you're on the track. This is so amazing." I had never talked to her once about the call of God on my life. And as she's turning to walk out of my office, cubicle area, she stops, turns, and says this, "Well, I guess I thought you were supposed to be a pastor, but maybe you're too scared to do it." So I threw things at her. No. So I remember I was picking up the phone to call Jamie and tell her I made it. And I put the phone down and I went out and sat on a parking lot curb, 12 Mile in Greenfield in Southfield, Michigan. And I sat on the parking lot curb and I said, "God, I'll give all this up. If you really want me to be a pastor, you tell me yes, for sure, right now." And as clear as day, the Lord said, "Do that." And that little decision has led me to where I'm at today. But little did I realize at 24 that I would be a pastor at the church I grew up at, that I would be the lead executive pastor, the lead pastor. I had no clue I would ever serve as superintendent. Did I ever even want to? Some days I still don't. But look what God does with little decisions. Everyone makes decisions all the time. And I want to read this to you, and you're going to focus in on the word lazy here, but I don't want you, or the word sluggard, but I don't want you to think I'm calling you sluggard, okay? We're dealing with the bigger principle. Proverbs 24 says this, "I went past the field of a sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense." You all are thinking of someone right now. "Thorns have come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds, and the stone wall was in ruins. I applied my heart to what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man." This text was written about 1,000 years before Jesus would come, and King Solomon is entitled with writing this text. We know the story. Solomon is the son of King David, and as he writes this, it's sort of like he's on a walking stroll, if you will. He's walking, and there's some people potentially with him, and as he's walking, he turns to the right or turns to the left, and he sees a field where grapes should be growing. He sees a wall that should be intact, but they're not. Where grapes should be growing, where vines should be growing, weeds are growing. Where walls should be in place that were functional walls. They weren't just decorative. This isn't like just for the appealing look. These walls were designed to keep certain things in and keep certain things out. And he looks over and says, there's no vineyard there. There's weeds. There's no security. There's no walls built up. They're in ruin, and things can come and go. And as he's walking, the text tells us he sort of just stops. He just stops. Now, I shared this on the marriage retreat. My father-in-law, he passed away a year ago, but he used to carry pruning shears around with him on his walks. And anytime he thought a tree branch was too far over on the sidewalk, he would trim it and throw it on the neighbors' lawns. Okay? So you ever have those moments? You ever have that moment when you're on a walk and you see something at someone's house and you secretly judge them with a smile on your face? Like, what is wrong with that house? That is so ugly. Why would they do that? We have a neighbor. Can I tell this? I'm gonna. She's saying no, but I'm gonna. We have a neighbor who didn't plant any real shrubs. They planted fake shrubs in their entire front yard. It's smart. It's horrible. They look like little Christmas trees. Like I'm gonna cut them down. And he stops and he looks and he says, something's wrong here. Something that should be producing vines is producing weeds. Something that is supposed to bring safety is in disrepair. And chapter 24, verse 32, he makes this statement. I applied my heart to what I observed, and I learned a lesson from what I saw. What he says is this, as he stops and he observes, he says, something's bothering me about this environment. He thinks, this guy one day is going to wake up and he's going to be in financial ruin. His livestock is probably gone. Something could get in and kill his livestock. He's going to wake up one day, and his whole life is going to be in a position that he's not going to realize has been happening for a long time. This man, he slept when he should have worked. He made little decisions to do non-activity that resulted in a result that he will someday regret. He chose the route of comfort rather than the difficult work of labor. And he says in verse 33, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And he says, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Now, I want to talk about this for a moment. Leave that verse up on the screen if you can. I want to talk about this. There's a certain cadence that happens in this text. I want you to see if you catch it. It seems like the language of this text is slow. How many would read this like this? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. It seems like there's this slower, methodical pace to the text that sort of lulls you into actually what it's describing. How many of us does it also sound wonderful, like a nap? But then all of a sudden, it seems in verse 34, and you can switch to that, or it's on there, I'm sorry. It picks up the pace. And it goes from a little sleep, a little slumber, insignificant things, small things that you do, little things that you create in your behavior, and then it comes in hard. And poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. It's the image of a gradual decline with a sudden ruin. Do you see it? It's like this dramatic moment of all this time. I don't know if I'm allowed to walk this far. Cameras, try to keep up. Keep up with this gorgeous bald head. Come on. That was a joke. It'll be sweaty in a few minutes, and you won't think it's gorgeous. It's this idea of moving like this and just enjoying, sort of floating through life. And it's like all of a sudden, a wall comes and runs into you. Somehow this gradual decline and then a feeling of sudden ruin. I want you to watch this. Often when we neglect areas of our life, we have moments when we realize the little decisions we made over the course of our lives, but we don't realize them until we're run over by the truck. We have to understand it didn't happen in a day, but we realize it in a day. Come on. We wake up one day and we realize we're a bitter person. My great aunt, she kept a record of every single wrong people did to her in her entire life, and every morning would read it. When she died, her children said, "We don't even care what you do with her body. We're not showing up or having a funeral. She didn't deserve it." Because you wake up one day and you're bitter, but you've been slowly becoming bitter for a lot longer than you realize it. The alcoholic one day has to identify as part of the steps for recovery is that I am an alcoholic. And the reason that's so important is you have to get to the realization I am something I created, but you didn't create it in a moment. You created it from the first drink. Your marriage is off track. You're tempted to get into inappropriate content or an affair, or you're ready to walk and bail on your marriage and you say, I just can't take it anymore. And in a moment you realize your marriage is in trouble, but your marriage was in trouble long before that moment arrives. One day you wake up and you feel like your faith isn't working anymore. And you feel it deeply. You begin to question a lot of things about God. And you examine a lot of things and you say, I don't know if I believe like I used to. I will tell you, you realize that in a moment, but there's been behaviors and things you've neglected where weeds have grown where grapes should be. And Solomon suggests that this guy's going to wake up one day and say, this isn't fair. Boy, isn't that the cry of our society? This isn't fair. Fairness has become the standard for what we do. How many know fairness is not the biblical standard? In our society, we walk around and say, well, that's not fair. Well, that's not fair. Listen, I love my daughter. We never taught her this, my youngest. She's an athlete, and she had won a bunch of championships in softball and basketball, and then one day her team didn't win. Her team had a bad season, and she got a participation trophy. Now, I'm not criticizing participation trophies, but I am. How many know sometimes you just lose in life and you have to get over it? Can I just say that? Sorry, Pastor Matt, I don't know if I'm getting in trouble here. But she walks in the house with her participation trophy. I've never said this to her. I've never given her any. And she goes to the garbage and throws it in the garbage. Jamie says, what are you doing? She says, you bought that. I didn't earn that. Jamie's like, get that out of the garbage. I said, let that stay in the garbage. Because there was something about my daughter that naturally understood that it's not about being fair and getting a participation trophy, that sometimes in life we lose. And the problem we have in the spiritual world is we've taken the culture of fairness and said nobody ever loses, and it's affected our spiritual understanding so that you can sin and not feel like you're spiritually losing. So we live in this culture that says, well, the Bible doesn't really mean that, or I can change the biblical understanding of that, and I can adjust this biblical thing to fit my lifestyle. And this happened many years ago, so it's not relevant to today. And so we begin to neglect certain things, and we arrive at a spiritual place where faith is about where you go to church, not what church happens inside of you. And we wonder why the American church is not reaching people with the message of hope. It's because we have a church that's lost hope. Because it's been about negotiating how far we can get away from the center of the cross and still be saved, as opposed to how close can we look like Jesus. And Solomon's like, dude, when you say this isn't fair, how did I end up here? He's going to say, dude, it's your fault. This didn't happen in a moment. This happened over time. And then something happens. That warning shifts. And I want you to notice something in the text you may not have noticed. Solomon starts off talking as he's on a stroll. I went past a field. I observed. I applied this unto my heart. But then something happens. The pronouns shift, and he moves from an I to a you. Watch it. I applied my heart unto what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding hand. And then he says, and poverty will come on you. He shifts, and somehow in Solomon, the wisest man ever, he shifts from a personal observation that he applies to his own heart, and then it becomes a general warning for all of us. And poverty will come on you, and scarcity will come on you. He twists the storyline. It doesn't go as we expect. It changes direction. And he turns to the audience and he says, here's what he's saying. Don't be like that guy. That the lesson applied is not just for Solomon, it's for all of us. Don't be that guy. He's saying, you, listen, get it. You don't want to be that man or woman who lives with a grudge and suddenly you find out you have no friends. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to wake up one day at your senior's graduation from high school and realize you missed out on years you could have been there because you were prioritizing other things. He says, don't be that guy. You don't want to wake up one day and realize you never fully yielded your life to God and connect with Him like you should. So Solomon says, hey, don't be that guy. And let's just imagine if this guy is hearing this. Now, it's not in the text, but let's say this guy opens his front door, steps out and sees Solomon, hears Solomon saying, don't be that guy. This guy would walk out and he'd say, hey, Solomon, what's your problem, man? This isn't fair. I didn't do anything to cause this. Or I didn't do anything. And you know what Solomon would say is? Exactly. He'd say, what do you mean? I didn't knock those walls down. I didn't plant those weeds. And Solomon says, exactly. Weeds just happen. This guy did not plant those things, did not knock down the wall, unless he was a lunatic running around like, let me plant weeds, let me knock down the wall. See, you don't need to plant jealousy. All you have to do is neglect gratefulness. You don't ever have to plant envy. You don't have to plant anger. You don't have to plant complaining. It just shows up when you don't plant other good things. All you have to do for your marriage to fail is do nothing. All you have to do is to fail as a parent is to do nothing. I said this on the marriage retreat. Parents, you're not raising kids, you're raising adults. And sometimes they're not going to like you, and that's okay. The problem we have, and I'm getting near the end, not yet for the worship team, but how many know when a pastor says they're nearing the end, they're just giving you hope that they know it has to end? Doesn't mean they're actually ending. The problem is weeding is work. And in our culture, that's 24/7, news feed on, phones dinging, iPads and computers always calling for our attention. The idea of having to do work is getting increasingly challenging. Some of the most critical aspects of our lives, all you have to do is take your hand off the wheel and it will become whatever it becomes. And I don't know about you, but I decided a long time ago that my life wasn't going to happen on accident. It was going to happen on purpose. And this guy's like, I can't believe it happened, but walls don't just fall if you maintain them. They do if you don't. And walls don't just need to be built once, they need to be rebuilt over and over, refortified, re-strengthened. In a moment of honesty, the question for all of us is, how are you doing with this? Are you just doing nothing in parts of your spiritual life, or your married life, or your parenting life, or your work life? Are you just going to work and you're punching in right on time, you're doing the bare minimum, you punch out, and then you get really mad when the guy next to you gets the raise or the promotion? And you say, well, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and then the guy next to you says, yeah, but I did more than I was supposed to do. I told a pastor one time, he said to me, he said, you know, Pastor Aaron, I just want you to know I'm kind of in a coast mode. I said, what does that mean? He says, I'm planning to retire in a couple years, and I just don't want to have any conflicts, so I'm really not pushing any agenda. We just pretty much preach on Sunday, and that's it. He said, he thought I would be proud of him, and I said, sir, you need to resign your church. He said, what are you talking about? I said, that's a sin and a crime to the kingdom of God, is to be in a position and decide to do nothing. Now, to his credit, he responded, and God's doing a great work in his church. But how many know this is true in every area of your life? Some of you are here today, and you're trying to rebuild something in your life that got demoralized or defeated over time. You wake up one day and realize you're relationally poor. We had a lady at our church that sat in church like this. And she said to me one day, I'm going to leave the church. I said, why? She goes, this church isn't friendly. I said, what do you think about that? I said, do you really want to know? She said, what? I said, are you just complaining and want me to just validate that, or do you really want to know my thoughts? She said, I really want to know my thoughts. I said, you are not a safe, nice, or warm person. It got worse. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I don't like talking to you on Sundays because I'm scared of you. She said, you're the pastor. I said, yeah, I know. I said, when I see you sitting there and I say hi to you, you go, She says, well, I don't think you're very nice. I said, well, we're on the same page of how we feel about each other. See, sometimes we create our own problems and then we make it everybody else's issue. So I want to encourage you. Today, reach back and pick up a stone and put it back in place. In parts of your life where you've let the wall just crumble. It is hard work, but there is a reward for those who work. I told my daughters every day of their entire life, from the time they were born, every time that I saw them, I told them this. I said, hey, remember your daddy loves you. Every day, remember your daddy loves you. Hey, today, remember your daddy loves you. One day somebody said, why do you do that? And I said, because someday there's going to be a moment when they need that. And I remember my daughter came home one day, and she had a rough day at school, and she was crying, and I was sitting next to her on her bed, and she had her head on my shoulder, and I said, how'd you get through the day, hon? That's really rough. And she said, well, I just remembered that my daddy loves me. Hard, intentional work every single day. I was talking to Sister Clay. Her son calls her every day, and I called my mom every morning, every single morning of my life, until she passed away 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And when my mom was dying from cancer, she made this statement to me. Did I always have time to make the phone call? No. Sometimes she'd call and she'd keep me on the phone way too long. Sorry, Sister Clay, you probably do that too. I'm just saying. Just saying. It's possible. It's possible. Sometimes I just wanted to check in and just get off the phone quick. But my mom said this to me at the end of her life. She said this, Aaron, there has never been one moment in my entire existence with you where I wondered if you loved me. Weeding the garden, I got that reward. I got to hear from my mom. She's never wondered if I loved her. Teenagers, love your parents. Because there's a reward that comes when you do things right. See, you can't fix anything in 24 hours, but you can do something within 24 hours. If the team can come on up. See, the vineyard was designed to cultivate grapes, but it produced weeds and thorns. And like the vineyard, we're supposed to produce fruit in our life. How do we know that? Jesus, in one of his last teachings says this in John chapter 15, verse 5 through 8. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, in other words, if you do the work, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciples. He says the more connected you are, the more you rebuild the walls and build them and keep them healthy, the more you pull the weeds, the more the right things will grow and fruit will be the result. And then, remember, he's 24 hours away from the cross at this moment. He looks at Peter, James, John, Matthew, and Andrew, and he makes this statement in John 15:15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Let me interpret that. When we started, you didn't know and you didn't pay the price. Check this out. But now that you've served alongside me, you know the cost. And you've worked hard, and you've been diligent, and you've suffered, and it's going to be harder. But I know what lies ahead. So no longer are you servants, but I now have called you friends. The reward for the hard work is he calls them friends. For everything I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Aaron, I never wondered if you ever loved me once in your life. Dad, I just remembered my daddy loves me. Hey guys, you're no longer my servants. You've worked hard with me. You're my friends. And by the way, I see the fruit of your vineyard. And Peter, I know that the wall has been knocked over and it's going to get rough again. But Peter, I know someday, after you deny me, that you're going to preach a message when 3,000 plus people will come to know Jesus, will come to know me as their Savior. And while you're up there standing there, Peter, and you're preaching, you're really taking the bricks and rebuilding the wall. And I'm starting to see the fruit that will come. Oh, I know all of you are going to be martyred for my name's sake. You're going to suffer greatly, but I'll see the fruit because it's worth it, because now you're my friends. I remember a girl in our youth group came up to me and she said, Pastor Aaron, she was an adult. She says, I just want to say thank you. I'm everything I am in life because of the work you put into my life and all the things you and Jamie did. And I wouldn't have made it without you. And I stopped her, and her name was Kelly. And I said, Kelly, stop. She said, what? I said, that's wonderful. And I know what you're saying is that we've done a lot of work together. And I said, but I can't take the credit for the work you've done. And she said, why? I said, because I don't want the blame when you mess up. And she laughed. But how many understand? We got to get back to the hard work of our spiritual lives and our family lives. The church is the only hope for this world. Jesus is the only thing that's going to change society. And it's not going to happen until the American church once again says it's time to pull some weeds and rebuild some walls, and the fruit of the kingdom will be evident to all who encounter us. Everywhere we go and in every environment. So how's your vineyard and how's your wall? If Solomon were to walk by your life, would he stop and say, I've applied something? Because we experience it in a moment, but it's been gradual decline. I'll end with one last story. There was, I thought of this during worship today. It was not even in my notes. I was at a church, and a lady came up to me, and I've told the first half of the story. I haven't told the second half. She came up to me, and she was probably about 90, and she was in a walker, and she came walking down the aisle with a look of like she was going to kill me. And she gets to me, and she says, in all my years of the assemblies of God, I've never seen a superintendent not preach with a three-piece suit and tie on. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. Now, Jamie wasn't with me this Sunday, which was a big mistake. Because my reply, because I'm a very nice guy. I don't love conflict. I'm a very nice person. I'm very honoring. What I meant to say to her was, I'm really sorry I disappointed you. Please forgive me. Maybe you can see beyond that and I'll do better in the future. But what came out of my mouth is, well, how old is the dress you're wearing? Who said that? I mean, it was like an out-of-body experience. Like, who is saying this stuff? And she said, well, it's about 30 years old. And my reply was, well, it looks beautiful on you. It looks great. Oh, no. Some idiot took over my body. And I said, well, it looks like we both need an upgrade. I literally just knew the Lord was going to come back and I wasn't going. To this lady's credit, she started to laugh. She goes, I like you. I was like, oh, thank God. I said, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I don't know. My wife's not here. She goes, oh, I understand. You got problems. And I was like, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. It was terrible. It was a terrible moment. We talked for a little bit longer. And as we were leaving, she was out in the parking lot and she was at her car. And I went over to her car and I said, ma'am, I just want to thank you again for being grace-filled. That was a totally inappropriate response. She says, you're right. She goes, it was a totally inappropriate conversation and I'm sorry I did that to you. And I said, well, no, I was apologizing for me. She goes, you know what? You preached the word of God and all I saw was no tie. She said, shame on me. And she looked at me and goes, in all the years I've been in the Assembly of God Church, you would think I would act better than that. And you know what? That didn't negate what I did. That was really dumb. I came home and told Jamie, she goes, my daughter says, Dad, we can't leave you alone anywhere. We can't leave you alone anywhere. One other thing. I was walking in my yard the other day. It has nothing to do with the message. I'm going to end with the close and we'll be done. How many ever seen those stakes you put into the ground? Like those little portable fences you stick in the ground? I was carrying them while my family was gone and I tripped and fell and impaled myself with 3 of them. So when they came home, they saw it. And my daughter has now a running list of all the dumb things I do alone. And she's decided that at some point, even while my wife's alive, they might need to hire a babysitter. It's really true. But anyway, here's the point. As I was thinking about the message and thinking of that story, I realized what that lady did from the time she was at the altar to the time she got to her car. She pulled some weeds. She rebuilt the wall. This is something we all can do. It's not complicated. It's hard work, but it's worth it. So Bethany, pull some weeds, rebuild some walls, and find out what God will do when we do what we're supposed to do for him. Can I pray for you? And then I'll turn it over to the team and Pastor Matt. Lord, I pray for this amazing church. I pray that as you examine our lives and the fields that we live in, that you would look to that and you would help us to know what to do. That, Lord, maybe it starts today with a phone call and an apology. Maybe it's an apology as you leave to one of your family members. Maybe, Lord, it starts with just a shift of a determination to be better. Maybe it starts with a cutting of a credit card or creating a budget. Maybe it's simply forgiving somebody even if they're not worthy of it, nor would they even ever ask for forgiveness. Maybe, Lord, it's just something small that we can do. Even right now, I pray that you bring things to people's minds, that across this room, whatever it is, would settle in their spirit. And that, Lord, we become professionals. So someday, if Solomon were to walk by our yard, say, look at the fruit. Look at the safety. Look at the livestock. Look at what's happening there. And it would be an example to all who pass by of how greatness is accomplished by being good compounded over time. Lord, bless this church. In your name we pray. Amen.